始めるときは一応大熊先生の発表ですからこちらにこれでもいいですしこれでもいいですし一人まあ緊張すればね忘れてもいいですけど緊張しなければ始める前で一回こちらでこう礼をしてそれから
Doctor, excuse me, doctor. I'll give you a hand if you're going to people on the side. All yours.
Your umbrella. It's not raining.
Once you come in and get it, come on over. Okay, you can move up right up to the red line if you want. Stay close. Why stay far? You want to
meeting of the Japan Martial Arts Society. And before we get the show on the road, as it were, I'd like to give you a few minutes of the last meeting, which was held in June. The 17th general meeting was presented, or the presentation was by Mr. Don Tren, a board member of JMAS. He gave a demonstration on modern kendo techniques, and it was followed by a brief demonstration of some of the kata of Onoha Ito Ryu Kenjutsu. And the final part of the program was a showing of a number of films by, let me put it this way, of the Nihon Kendo Kata as performed by a number of the senior teachers, master exponents of Kendo. Also the board member of JMAS. Before turning the meeting over to Mr. Lander, I'd like to give you a very brief treasury report. Today we have about $2,000 in the safe. Not much of anything here.
I think you'll find it useful when looking at a form to then refer to the piece of paper to see the image that's associated with the movement. I will be only doing the translation. Mr. Nakai, who is an assistant instructor of Mr. Su, will be giving a Japanese presentation. What we would like to do is after each form is presented, if anybody has a question regarding that form, we can take one or two questions, no more than that, for that form. And then we will go on and show another form. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Su and his group, and Mr. Nakai, who will be doing the verbal presentation. How do you do? My name is Mr. Nakai.
歴史生部会の総機関である宋先生を紹介いたします。
I'd like to introduce Mr. So, the head of the dojo.
じゃあ早速今から今日は経験と発見賞両方こちらで共演したいと思いますが、経験の方から先に。
English for Keiken and Agua for Hakkei-sho. We will start with Shingi-chen, but before we do, we would like to introduce the group which will be demonstrating today.
やってもらいますけども、その前に経験のポイントを少しお話ししたいと思います。
Mr. Adams will be demonstrating the five basic forms of Shingi. But before we do, we would like to talk a little about what Shingi is, what its history is, and what the meaning of the word is.
まず歴史からですが、これは学費将軍という人が作ったという説と、それから文献なんかを見ますと、気流法という人が槍を用いる時の方法を手の動きで表したという2つの説があります。
There are two traditions regarding the founding of Shingi. One is that a man named Gakuki Shogun founded it, and the other is that a man named Ki Ryuho founded Shingi based on the movements of Japanese spear techniques, which he then transferred to handed techniques. Okay, we will just... The form looks like a very small form, but within that form, there are many different applications that are, in a sense, covered up by the form. Rising and falling. This form is commonly interpreted in the way I've just shown, but that's rather slow. You see lots of explanations like this, but that's really rather difficult to do. In reality, you have to do this quite quickly. When this movement is stopped, they can actually do
work your way up to the person's body. So once their arms are stabilized, from there you can throw what you're inside of the time. The turn from number 4, power.
The traditional explanation of power just shown is at a distance, but really you have to move in close. So even if you strike once, the movement hasn't ended. You move in closer. Do it again. All from the same movement. Power, which is expansion and contraction. These are all one variations on one movement. It's nice if you can attack in one movement, but much better if you're sensitive enough to stabilize one point of the body and work your way up.
1、2、まず相手両手の動きを封じるわけですね。
You stop the movement of one and then the second hand.
横に来て両方。
Then you're inside.
こういったことを基本として、技が走っていきます。例えば、この3つの速さの一部もあります。
You can make your strikes quicker by practicing in the way I'm just doing now.
これ5つの動きを一着してできたのは、これからやります。
The 5 movements I've just shown can be practiced quickly in the manner that we're going to do now. This is to develop sensitivity.
まず P。
First movement, P, rising and falling.
すぐ打ち返す。そしてだんだん速くします。
Slower to faster and faster.
はい、これでいいです。そしてこの動きの速さというのは、1回するだと、これ以上の速さが出てこない。速く練習は、他の方法で訓練したらもっと効果がある。
So you don't develop your speed just from that one movement. You do a series of various exercises to develop speed.
はい、まずあなたから。2。これによって、回転する速さを練習することがいい。
This way you can develop it moving faster and faster.
はい、これが2番。
Second movement, sun, drilling.
はい、はい。ツワンは、この間を入り込むことをツワンですから。
You're trying to move through the gaps in their defense.
2、3。この動きがこうなるように。この動きがツワンの。
This is the movement of swan.
この手でもいい。
Use the outside or the inside.
この動きで。
Sort of zigzag movement or spiral movement.
はい。3、はい。これがツワンの練習の仕方。はい、3番。
Next movement, pone. Compression and expansion in the hips.
はい、100。はい。4番。はい。
The fourth movement, foul, is expansion and expanding and contraction. 4番は、このことを意味してますので、まず手でパッと打ち方が出てきます。いいか。 Fourth move, you have to throw a hand out first.
5番。はい、5番。この速さの練習をします。
Try to practice quickly this way.
相手の思いたいところです。
From this movement, there are many variations.
5番。
Fifth movement, home.
回ることで練習します。
Spiral into the center.
2、1、2、2、はい、ここから入ります。
From here, we'll start variations.
打ったら、ね、注意していただきたいというのは、これは掴んだんじゃない。
You're not grabbing at this point.
こういう感じになる。
Your hands are still open. You're stabilizing. They're sensitive.
ちょっと回り込む。パンパン。ここから、
Then you circle
両方。
and move in. You use both sides, attack both sides at
これ
once.
別に力で打ったんじゃなくて、これは後ろからショックがある。
The shock comes from the back.
これ、痛く打ち込む。ということで、技を移行しても痛くなるわけですね。
This way you can make your technique strong.
で、例えば、打ったら、投げに入れても、
After you strike, you can throw.
可能になるわけです。これ一つの方法で、
This all comes from these 5 basic movements.
これからやる方はみんなこの体操が入ってます。
From these forms you get locks, you get strikes, and you get throws.
今の新先生の話を簡単にポイントでまとめます。まず我々相手と対した場合には遠い場合が1番、そして2番目に相手と触れた中ぐらいの場合、そして入れる一番近い円中近、この3つの段階を遠い時は早く、中ぐらいの時は粘ったり、そして3番目は先ほどの投げるというふうに1、2、3、この流れが大事。
We divide our techniques in 3 basic combative distances: far, middle, and close. From far distance, you fight with strikes.
Middle distance, you fight close to the stage.今回りますね。2 the turning point. Each one of these forms you move in a straight line and then you do a turn.
2 And these turns are usually a throwing practice.
これで回るところというのは投げの技を意味するのが多いんです。
Usually the turns indicate a throw in these forms.
そこの敵と戦うんじゃなくて、この人をまず倒さないと。
It's not that you're turning around to fight another opponent. You're still fighting the same opponent.
後ろの人と戦うんじゃなくて、この前進はこの変化がある、因果の変化がある。
You're just turning in the sense on the same axis, so you're still fighting the same person.
打ち技が上げ技。
Strikes are throws. It's the same technique.
もっと負けて投げてもいいんですけど、相手はどういう低いからこう。
If the opponent's smaller than you, then you just step out of the way and you can turn it into a kick.
こっちでもいい。という場合は首を押して、このままここまで。
So depending on the stance, the strength of your opponent, how big or small they are, your technique is different. The same water strider
例
technique
え
is
ば
a
こ
throw
こ
or
で
a
手を
strike.
取って言いますと、1、2、3、
So from the form, now we're doing a practice back and forth, a two-person form. Practice entering technique, practice kicking technique.
それで技が変化していくわけですね。一つ
And
の
that's
技
how you can do variations.
一つの技をずっと守るのではなくて、その変化がそういう変化。
So the idea is not to practice a basic form and try to guard it as close as possible. It's to develop the ability to make quick variations. The next form is the horse form. So this form is not you are a horse, you're in a sense riding a horse, holding the reins. And the horse is galloping underneath you, so to speak. That's the movement. When the demonstrator goes in this direction, he's demonstrating.
ペンケンですね。それは、この時代から残ってきたもので、
Okay, on the paper, the images, in a sense, that are associated with this form, they come down from about the year 1733, somewhere in around that period when Qingyi is supposed to have been founded.
でその中に書いてあるのこのポイントっていうのは、ペンケンっていう中には、それじゃんに、と書いてあります。そこはですね、剣のポイントですから、型の中にそういうところを生かさないといけないわけですね。
So the points that are written down, for example, the point I've just shown, has to come alive in the form.
手綱ですからね、手綱を取る気持ちですから、こう。
You have to feel like you're holding reins of a horse that's galloping.
要するにここに肩に近いことですね。
You don't put any power in your shoulders.
でないと、速い。
If you don't put power in your shoulders, you can move a lot quicker.
でもう一つ、
And you can use your hips.
ってなくなるわけですね。もう一回。そういったひねり。
You just twist a little
はい
bit.
そういう時だ。打ちに行って、それこの打ち方は、注意することは、パッと来たら、パッと相手を巻き込んで、
Wrap around the opponent.
巻き込んでいますから、
And once you wrap them, you can strike low.
足を使った打ち方。
And you strike from your feet. It's not just an arm strike.
そして同じ技を使って、今度、近距離を持っていきますと、
So if he puts power in, then you just, using the same form, now strike high.
そうしたら最低値を受けます。
So if he blocks that, then you retract and strike again.
肘打ちに入った後ですね。
You can strike this time with your elbow.
ちょっと見てね。一つは、これ。
That's the basic form.
一つをもう一つ。もう一つ。でも同じ。
The same form, the same basic.
型取りの説明だと、こういきますと、親指になって手を。
This is the basic form,
相手を
broken down.
受けたら、
Strike, and if he blocks it, you pull and strike
巻き
again.
込んで、
Wrap
こ
him,
れ打ち。
strike,
そしたら、そのまままたポンとこう。
pull again, and then you're inside.
ね、そしてうまく足を使うこれ。
Then use the horse's leg.
ね、これ。そして1、2、3が揃ったわけですね。こういった関係で、この権限が必要として今やってるわけです。
So this way you keep the image in your mind, and you're able to make the form come alive. The three movements in the form.
2つ目のポイント。
Next point.
ね、これ滑ったじゃなくて、まあ、ポイントです。ね、馬がこうしてることを言ってる。
It's not slipping or sliding his feet. This is the galloping movement of a horse.
で、例えば、パンこれは止まったの。
If you strike like that, you stop. You stop, your movement stops.
倒れればいいんですけど、倒れなかったら落ちます。
It's nice if you can knock him down, but what if you don't?
ね、これ危ないから、
Dangerous to you.
これと、ここで一回ね、
So you keep mobile. You don't lock yourself into one position.
技を止めないためのやり方。よく
So this is a way to learn to not stop your was and focus on one point. To always keep in motion.
電動のハンマーで
And you should have the feeling of like a pneumatic hammer.
足が止まらない。
So you should never stop your feet from moving. In the throw, going they will move. One breaking the form down. Coming back they will bring it together.
3、4、5、5分、1、2、3、4、5、
And when it finds it, then it attacks and grabs it with its claws.
この憲法で人間のやる動きですので、特別というかですね、神が的な技はないはずですね。そういう考えてみますと、それはボクシングの場合よくこれしますね。ね、打ってきたらこういうのない。やられちゃうわけですね。
For example, against a boxer, you can't just move in the way I've just moved. I'm going to be hit.
例えばこう来たときに、でも、よく注意することは、これはボクシングじゃないから。確かにこれ早い。
Boxing is faster. You can't just think of avoiding one blow.
で、パッと来たら、でも、他のもんがなって、こう来るんですよ。横とか、肘も入る。
Something else is going to come once the first blow has come.
そうすると、一つの動きで相手を返すことできないので、ね、そうするとどっちが全体でも
So within one movement, you have to move your whole body out of the way, not just sway out of the way.
別に僕インチキ者じゃない。彼動いた僕も動いた。
So as he moves, I move.
この動き、パッとこのぐらい気持ちがあると。ね、パッと相 相手をここ
circle around.
ここにね来たら
And once you attack, in other words, once you're out of range, you have to attack before his next attack can come.
この天撃っていうのは中国ではこれボシムの天撃法というんです。
This kind of point, this kind of jabbing attack.
そしてこういったことを線の合わせた太極拳みたいな
This is similar to the kind of movement you have in Tai Chi.
線とか面は
This kind of line action is similar to that in Tai Chi.
それとかその後のパワーパーになってきますと打ってきたら上下右左でも取ることが3戦撃の場合は拉致事件
So a jab, like you're seeing now, is a one-dimensional attack. It's a point.
早いことは早い早いことは早い、はい、そして分かったら代理のことをやらなくてはいけない
So to deal with an attack on one point, you have to move, in a sense, on a two-dimensional.
それは打ってきて
Right.
俺も長かったじゃないここも長いからここも長かった
So in this form, I'm longer than he is, so I win without doing anything else.
ねあなたどうぞそういう場合もあると
Of course, you have cases like that.
第二段階で打ってきたら線
But in this case, I'm moving to the side. I'm moving out of the way of the attack. But at the same time, neutralizing.
線と線絡まったからここに切られて倒した
It's moving on planes.
ね倒してパッコリこういったから
And this movement I've just done here, that's the movement of the hawk sweeping down to attack.
線から出てきますそうすると123という段階が出てきますね元も人間自体は分かる
So these are all human techniques. They aren't godlike techniques. They're all in the three dimensions of human life. Seem to be practiced empty-handed, but are they ever practiced with weapons in your hand?
そうですね中国でもですね一つよりもですね型のが分かりやすいんですで一つのが表現しにくいんです、例えば最初の打って言いますとこれポイントの一つ目は書いてありますね。ここに書いてあります。
It's more difficult to practice these techniques empty-handed than with a weapon, because with a weapon you can focus on a point. But of course that can be done.
手の場合は、例えば今までの技というかこれはとても多いんです。直線的な技が多いんです。
So the most basic kind of movement is the kind you see here, attacking in a straight line.
そしてそこのポイント書いてありますね。
So in these charts here, the seeing these different animal forms, the number one is the function.
例えばあなた武器持ったつもりで武器を持って
So if he has a weapon in his hand,
こういったものが
you move the same as if your opponent has a weapon or if he doesn't have a weapon.
変化になるわけですね。そして2番目は単語があるでしょ。
農場の
So the second level of function is coiling around.
相手できたらこれは当たりますね。動かないと当たります。
So if I don't move the attack, he strikes me.
それでこれ線になったらこれでやめないでこうしないで
So you don't make a big movement to counter somebody with a weapon. You make a small movement.
また打てたさっきの思い出してきて何さっきの
But then you go back to number one.
肩
彼の質問は自分自身が武器持って練習する愛です。武器に対して練習じゃなくて、自分自身が持ったらそういう練習ありますか？あります。Yeah. There is such practice.
例えば、こうの場合は、
For example, holding a staff.
巻く練習。
So you learn to hold a staff to wrap around another staff, for example. For example, this pencil.
まあ、いわゆるボードいただき一つは左右です。片で違う、両手でもいいんです。これとか、こういったものが1本目の意味です。
Use the weapon the same way.
巻くことがその意味です。
The twisting movement, the wrapping movement is done in the way I'm doing now, with a weapon or without.
これはそういう意味になっています。私は棒を使ってやります。
So we use a staff.
長い棒。このところが、使うことがよくあります。剣もあります。
So we sometimes use a straight sword as well. One of my seniors is here, so I'm a little nervous.
今の形は首を持ち上げるところに意味がある。
The bear form has the function of practicing to move your neck in the form you see there, from a low to a high movement. So that's the feeling you should feel. Moving from a hard outward stance and pulling inward, drawing inward. So you should have the power to push a mountain. Draw inward and then push. So breaking this movement down. So you move off the center.
これ本当は入れてもいいんだけど、柔らかいですね。
Really, I should move my feet in the way you've just seen, but the floor is too soft for that. Too many. So you draw inward. So to demonstrate the function of this form, as he strikes, I draw him inward. I strike and draw inward. And then I can attack with my shoulder. So I can draw him in further and then throw. If he strikes at me, I move the same way, but this time to the outside. Wrap him around, draw him in close, and then throw. I can also use this as a strike. Strike through the kidneys. The strike stabilizes his movement so you can throw. The smallest movement is this kind of wiggling movement I'm doing now. So it's both a strike and it's a drawing in movement. Question? Good question.
例えば、パッと会った時、あなた何やってるかわからない。わからない。あなた武道やってますか？やってないです。
For example, if you don't do martial arts, then it's easy for me to come in and attack.
だからその可能性みんなわからないと、
So I should be ready for anything.
そうしないと負けます。
If I'm not ready for anything, I'm sure to lose.
で武道は矛を止めますから、来たものをいかにして排除するかの問題ですので。
Since the character for Budo, is stopping a spear, I have to be ready to stop any kind of spear that comes, metaphorically speaking. So, 具体的に例えば戦闘機が大勢の人、大勢の人で、それをまた対比しよう。
そうですね。今までやったのは単年法ですので、どうしても対象が一人になりやすいんですね。そしてこの次もしフォロー、型をやる場合は、型は前後左右の変化します。そうすると課題方も違ってくる。
Of course, for the basic practice is against one person. That's easiest to learn against. But in a sense, these basic practices are just to develop you to be, in a sense, prepared for anything that comes along. So especially when you get into moving frontwards and backwards and from side to side, you're also being prepared for a battlefield as well. But the basic movement is one-on-one.
それともう一つが大きい意味で、もしこの剣の前後の動きを理解した人が将軍になって兵隊を動かせれば。
Okay, so an important point can also be said that if you really master the principles behind this kind of fighting and you are in a position to lead other people, using these principles you're going to be a very good general. But these principles, the principles of yin and yang, using the 5 variations which yin and yang is then expressed in Xingyi, you'll be able to move people in the same way you move your own body.
じゃあこれは太極拳を使って説明しますね。最初の辺では分かりやすい動きになったり。
So I'd like to use an example, using Tai Chi as an example now, because it has simple movements.
例えば太極拳よくこれ、ね、今テレビでコマーシャルも出てますね。ワンコンメン。
You see on television right now this movement, a Tai Chi movement in a commercial.
これは名前は単元でいいんですよ。単元。
So this technique is called single whip. That's what it really is.
単元。でも単元はね、遅ければダメなんです。
A whip is no good if it's slow.
そうですね。1キロ、2年間の1キロ、まず食べる。これは、
So if you're told practice this technique, and you do 2 years, you haven't gotten anywhere.
それで僕の思うには、パッ、次の受けられた。
What happens if he blocks it?
ね。速くても受けられる人は相手も速いから。
As fast as you are, somebody can always block your attack.
そこに変化が必要、変化。
So that's when it's important to be able to do variations
一
quickly.
つはパッ、手を返してこう打つか。ね、人は下打つか。
Strike high, strike low. That hand move, that pretty hand move, there it is as a grab.
重かったらこう。
Heavy, throw him down.
軽かったら投げる。
If he's light, pick him up.
これは変化です。変化できれば初めて
Once you can do variations, then you can make that technique live.
という一つの例ですね。もう一つは例えばこれ。
For example, you see this thing now, I think it's the needle dipping down to the bottom of the sea.
こうやって使ってやることできます。
You can use it small.
じゃあ相手もかわされた次どうしますか？
What happens if the opponent's able to block your movement?
また練習して10年間。
Then you're told to practice 10 more years.
10年間だとどのぐらい時間かかるか。
Do you have that time?
それでパッ一つ。
Then variations.
これも一つの変化。
You don't get stuck in one technique and think that one technique is not strong enough. That's the same thing.
陰陽の変化。
So that's the variation between yin and yang.
これ一つの例ですね。じゃあバッファー入りますね。先生。
Are in a sense called the innate forms of Pagua. Then they're compounded with another 8, so you have in all 64 forms, which are 64 variations, which are in a sense the developed forms of Pagua. Since you're born with 8, you multiply it with 8, and you're able to do 64 variations around a circle. So we would like you to just see the way Pagua is practiced. First, each technique separately, then brought together.
日本は直線ですので、分解してやります。
The first movements are straight line movements.
はい、はい。はい、1本目。青龍反手、一つの型の中に3動作。 回転バーで1、バー。前。はい、後ろへ。右。はい、左。2、3。
So we've broken the form down into front and back and left and right.
パンダ。そして今度言い方を変えます。移動差です。
Now we're going to do it in two movements.
新郎前走後前。前後ろ。前後の動き。
So now front and back of
回転バーで前後。前後ろ。
Once again, front and back together.
今度左右。新郎转身。
And now right and left.
そのバランスをよく練習してください。
So you balance these four movements.
パンダ。
Stable.
2番。后部加埋3动作。1。3動作。3動作。前に。3動作ね。はい。引用がありますね。1、後部。じゃ。
So we've gone back now to
はい。
three different movements.
これは一つの動きですね。
So that's really one movement together.
次、ウーロンブック3動作。1。開。2。合わせ。開始。一つ次を。後部。つなぎ技。
This is a throwing move. Excuse me, this is the second turn. Pagua.
先打地1、上、打地下。
This is a throwing move.
はい、拧身、絞り。摇头龙1、2、左。3、右。同摇1、
Once again, all these techniques you'll see it's first broke up into four parts.
3、
Front, back, left, right. And then the next time broken up into two
パン
axes.
ダ。
Axes.
これを8本ありますので、8本覚えたら今度円を使って練習します。
So once you've done the 8 turns,
はい。じゃあ、
then you do it around a circle. Walking around a circle.
3番、4番。
This young man is going to do the first 4 turns. The very first point is that he moves around a big circle and he turns. And then as he walks around the circle, he himself turns in the circle. He has his own axis. He's walking around the center and he makes his own circle on the edge of that. So he has to have the feeling of running around the circle, moving as quickly as possible while still stable. Now, the 8 basic terms of Pagua are associated with the I Ching, the 8 basic changes of the I Ching, the old Chinese method of divination. And then there 64 permutations also is associated with the classic use of the I Ching. So, on a more advanced level, it's very hard to even see the turns, all that's going on in each turn. There's so many techniques going on. We try to do it slowly first and break it down so you can have an idea. So when you break it down, you practice that yourself many, many times. So that each fraction of the movement has life, and you're able to use it. The essence of using pagua is in turning and spiraling, sticking to your opponent, twisting them. Turn. Okay, you're trying to find stillness in movement. That's the ideal of pagua. I made a mistake earlier. I said he's doing the last 4 movements. He's doing the second development of the 8 movements. This is blending the movements together more than the first demonstrator did. So, in all these movements, you're trying to twist every part of your body. Not just one part. Every part of your body should be twisting into the technique. Xingyi-chen is in a sense the opposite of pagua. Within stillness, you're supposed to find movement. Pagua, on the other hand, you move first and find the stillness through the movement. What's special about pagua is that even in the far, middle, and close techniques, you're always moving in 3 dimensions, not just side to side, but always up and down.
例えばね、今ね、格闘技に限ってね、話してますので、格闘技とか、
For example, thinking of combat.
中央憲法を挙げていますと、この長い打ち方と短い打ち方ある。ね、それはどう違うかまず考えてみないといけない。
So the first thing we have to consider is the difference between big movement and small movement.
少林と南少林の型を大体同じです。大きいか、ね、小さいか、ね、こういう分解ができます。
For example, in Shaolin, there's big Shaolin and there's small Shaolin. The technique is the same, the use is different.
型やった後は、やっぱり使うときでしょう。ね、こういうのはとても多いんですね。
型と使うときがバラバラの人。
So often enough, people who practice a certain form are not able to use the form they've practiced. As soon as they start to fight, they lose their form
よく使う
entirely.
技は大体映画で見たやつが多いですね。
映画で
それ
So you
だ
see the
け
kind of movements you see in the movies.
大体組み手の仕方はみんな大体同じような考えがある。
Almost everybody who fights has basically the same idea.
打ってやろうという考え方が始まりますから。ね、例えば、
All you think of is yourself.
速いと長いと速い。短いとこういったものが出てくる。ね、例え
distance, you have to be able to move quickly.
ボクシングもそうでしょ。ボクシングの場合はやっぱり手伸ばさないといけないと。伸ばさないとしたら
So you have to be able to move quickly and also long, particularly on somebody like a boxer.
ちょっと同じようにこういった回転的な技はとてもいい。
So you see in all Chinese boxing many movements like this.
ちょっと挨拶してください。そしてこういう場合、
So you find the position of your opponent, what kind of opponent you have, and then you move.
相手はここ守ってるんです。両手でしっかりと。
For example, you have an opponent who protects his center very tightly.
ここはあまり守ってない。
So he doesn't protect his back very much at all.
そしてここも使いないと。で後ろに回ったら、
And he can't protect his back
後
really.
ろに回ったらもうなると。
Arms aren't made that way.
だからこういった動きはとてもマイナスなんです。これ相手の欠点を攻めなきゃいけないわけね。
So you have to attack an opponent's weak point.
でしょ。パッと入ってきたんだけど、また同じ。
If you just attack his strong point, he's
あ、
going
も
to
う
be
一
able to
回。
neutralize you.
まだ出たらキリがない。
Or try and beat him with strength.
仮にじゃあ野球で僕勝とうとしたらまずこの距離をまず打たれないこと、あと打ちだから。
So first of all, I'm going to neutralize the closest point to me,
それで各位でセットもいいパッとする。そういうふうにしない。
and then work my way inside.
そしてパッ。
So this is a small movement. This is the same technique that wouldn't have any meaning outside, but it has meaning inside.
ここでバンダーが使える。ね、バンダーはここ使うんじゃない。ここでパパパパパパってないわけですね。ごめん。
So once you move on a corner from the side, you're able to use that sort of technique. You can't use it from the front.
そして僕言ったことをちゃんと記録してほしい。どうしたかというと、まず距離的な問題。両手使うこと。相手の防御する面積が2倍になった。で、手の動きが減ってきた。これ全部彼のマイナス。僕のプラス。ね。それを注意した方がいいね。それで、入り方としては、ここから始めると。
So is trying to move in, and once he gets in at a person's weak spot, that makes his next weakness. And he protects his next weakness, that makes the next weakness, and he's able to work his way in. Every plus for the Mr. Su as the attacker is a minus for the person he's attacking. And the most important thing is the distance that he's at, which determines the attack he'll make. So first is the distance, and second is the angle. So he would like you to, there's more to it than that, but the first two steps are the steps he'd like you to carry away with you today. First, consider combative distance, and second, combative angle.
勝敗のない戦いはしない方がいい。勝てない戦争はしない方がいいですね。
Of course, the best thing is never to fight a war you can't win.
これ見てみてくれるよ。ちっちゃいの。これはまず速さで攻めてみて。あとは、
So once you're in, move in with speed.
これは耳
Then you can take time.
ね。どうなったらもう困る。そうでしょ。後ろしたら右でもこれ同じ。ね。それとも前をしますから。ね。上げて、手を上げて。もう終わりですね。でもいろいろ技が可能になってきますね。ということで、まず距離的な問題を考えて。
The first problem is the problem of distance.
それで足はこれは蹴りにもなるわけです。ここはこれは足をこうするのはそんなに合わない。
So the
蹴ってもいい。
So the walking movement we just practiced, that funny way of walking around a circle, is used to develop kicking power and sweeping power.
はい、こう。
That turn, kobu,
引っ掛けてもいい。
the method of hooking the opponent's leg, kicking behind the leg.
はい。
Pai, who turn outward.
踏んでもいいし、
The
返
stomp.
してもいいし。
It's also a kick.
はい。
You can also use it to pull the opponent forward.
これは力じゃなくて、これ。
It's not, I'm not just using power. I'm finding his weak, a weak spot in his balance and just going in the same direction.
決めて、あ、動かない。お、やってますね。なるほど。
So what happens if the opponent withstands your first attack? Well, then immediately you feel that and move into something else. You don't fight against an opponent's strength.
足が止まらないから。
So you have to put consciousness in your feet. You never stop your feet from moving and from feeling out your opponent.
ありますね。
That movement has meaning. It's not just pretty.
ね、リズムがこう。
That movement also.
そして問題はここまでです。
The problem is getting there.
マイトンバーグ。また受けてみますか、
So if he blocks you, that opens up something else. Yeah, just accept whatever he gives you.
はい。それで、人海を手離れないと、こういうことに絡みます。出てきて。
But if you don't divide it up carefully and just attacks from the right distance, you get a situation which I've just done to try and throw somebody from outside. You can't.
そして、こっちが深い。それがこっちで。同じ。さあ、こっちでもいい。こっちでも同じ。こっち近い。こっち近い。こっちも近い。
So it's important to, how do you work your way in to attack the person?
相手高い。では、顎でいい。
So if the person's tall, you attack the chin.
そして、こう、車が近い。
Bring them down a little bit. Then you can work on their leg.
こう、そして、近い。
So this technique is the same kind of wrapping technique you saw in Shingi with the arms. Now you're using the legs the same way.
この技、
This technique,
一番最初にやった技あると。
the first technique we did in the practice of Padua.
ターンから練習する。はい。練習した後。だ。ね、あれ打ったら。でしょ。ね。さあ、今力かかった。いくらでしょ。さあ、
So you're blocked in one direction, he's obviously going to be open somewhere else.
ただ早いけどね、ダメ。
It's not just speed,
でもやったら早い。
because he can move too.
教えない。講談で教える。あ、両方同じ条件で戦ってみる。早い。
So both people are trying to do the same thing.
教えないじゃない。変化。変化。フォーク。前は使ってない。だ。これ打ったでしょ。手を変えた。
So here you are in the very basic form, exactly as we started out. So now side to side. This is the variation. Side to side, up and down. Kogu, this foot, this turning out foot becomes a sweep.
技は変化しない。その技によってルートの流れを分かってもらって、円中金大金。
So all the variations come from outside, middle, and inside distance, and side to side, and up and front and back. Within those three dimensions, you make each one of these very basic movements live. You're able to use them.
ちょっとね、先輩来てますから、直しもっと今から見てもらって。さあ、了解として。
My senior, I studied with him before in Taiwan, has come, and I'd like to ask him to demonstrate, because he surprised me by coming. So he's going to demonstrate a form of Tai Chi. everyone has demonstrated a small portion, one of the long Tai Chi forms. Now we'd like to have some questions. We have 20 minutes. These questions can be a request for some further demonstration of a point, anything regarding Xingyu, Pago, and Tai Chi. So any questions, please? We have 20 minutes. This is a lot of time. Okay.
Do you use training for wooden floor or mats or any type of form of floor?
The question is the training floor that we practice on tatami or wooden floor? What kind of surface do you have?
板ですね。今日はね、プリンもとても多いですので、もしあまり動きをやろうとしたら、大丈夫から、その内技はみんな入れないで、投げを道場にした投げを主にやります。
Usually the floor is a wooden floor. We can use tatami. As a matter of fact, today, because we have the floor we have with all the springs in it, it's hard to be stable. So we had to be a little careful about doing striking techniques because you end up swaying from side to side. So we centered on throwing techniques because we have a nice soft surface. Another way you can say it is when we want to breathe good air, we go outside. When we want to move quickly, we use a wooden floor. When we want to practice throws, then of course we use tatami.
スパイをやらないとき場合、スパイをやらない場合ね、例えばコンクリートとか違う場合。
So we're practicing on, say, a concrete surface.
例えばこれありましたね。打ちたくない、投げたくない、パッパ打ちたくないときは。
So a place we can't throw,
打ちたくない、痛いから。
we practice locks. So depending on the conditions, we can do different things. Where we can't throw safely, we turn that lock into a throw. This is called chinnat, a Chinese generic form of grappling, particularly as close to jujitsu techniques as China has. So you practice chinnat in a place where you can't throw safely. So when you can throw, you just go into a throw. It's a safe place for a throw. Or sweep. When you can't throw, you just keep the technique going into something else. So locks and strikes. Mike.
いつも型始まる前にそっちの道具がやりますかなんか真似できませんけどもそれはどういう意味でしょうか
The question in English is, when you start each form, there's a basic movement. This way. Start this way and come down here. What does that mean?
一番簡単な言い方というのは、一つは、まず立って立ち上がったときは、ニュートンと挨拶した引力の問題、キラ。
You could say it's a salute to gravity, salute to Newton. And you can start feeling out your own body condition, where you're stiff, where you're loose. So you start out by centering yourself to get ready to practice. So relaxing yourself. So it's a problem of breath, getting your breath in proper order, getting your body in proper order. So you check yourself. Yes.
Could you explain the type of breathing you use in classes and that type of technique?
When you're moving, there's basically two kinds of breathing. One is called breathing out and breathing in. Okay. One is called reverse breathing. In the reverse breathing, when you breathe in, you do. And when you breathe out, your stomach comes out. relaxed, regular with a shikokyu or regular breathing, in which when you breathe in, your stomach expands, and when you breathe out, your stomach contracts. That's good for a relaxed state.
激しい場合は逆に。
When you're moving quickly, roughly, then you should breathe in reverse. When you breathe in, you contract your stomach, and then expand when you breathe out.
両方やった方がいいんですけど、両方やらない人が多いんです。
Okay? It's good to do both, but many people don't.
例えば、自然とか座禅する人は、
For example, people who do standing Zen, it's a very popular form of what they call Qigong training. They usually do just the basic breathing in which they expand their stomach when they breathe out because they're always standing.
そしてヨガの場合は反対です。逆立ちして。
And for example, yoga, they often breathe in reverse, especially when they're standing on their head.
一つ大きい例ですね。
So it's best to do both kinds of breathing. Okay.
During the katas, will I do this in the nose?
肩の時はそういう鼻から出す。口から出す。
離れて
どうして？
口上げるとですね、この気がつながらないんですよ。
Okay.
こういうふうに上げますか。
You do breathe through your nose in these forms when you exhale. And that's because when you open your mouth, you don't have a connection of chi, in Japanese, ki, going completely through your body. You open your mouth and you break that connection.
最初に始まるときは舌を上で強く言いますね。
When you start, in most Chinese martial arts, they always say, bring your tongue up to the roof of your mouth.
それの原因です。
So that's supposed to be the way to move. So they breathe, exhale through the nose. Okay, questions? I'll get you in a second. Anybody over there? Okay, Mike.
いつも今日は例えば先ほどばっかりやりますけども、例えば寝技ぐらい周りにそういういろいろな無駄すぎないものも結構なんか。
Do you have any ground techniques? Grappling on the ground as well as standing techniques?
渡辺さん、構成はですね、これが寝技はとても少ないんですね。
I'd say that it's very unusual. There's very few ground techniques per se.
普通の戦いというのは、枯れるまでが勝負なんです。
Usually in a fight, the fight's over before somebody hits the ground.
もしそこを触れるまでやられたら、手に情けの持つ必要ない。殺すしかない。
If the fight isn't over after somebody hits the ground, all you do is now it's a question of killing them while they're down.
だからこれ武道ですから、そこまでですよね。
So you're not being a Buddha, you're not supposed to do that. So the fight it should be finished while you're on your feet. Phil.
Suppose you're on the ground.
自分倒れたらどうしたらいい？
Suppose you fall.
転んだとか。
はい、ですので、そこ、武道の研究は垂れるまでが一つの勝負なんです。自分が垂れるのは、例えばパッとしたら、ここからパッとこの技がスタートしたら、それは別に構わない。ね。
Okay, there's nothing wrong with using a technique as you're falling down, but you should train so you don't hit the ground.
例えば、今垂れたでしょ。これは僕として一番しっかりと切らない。それはやっぱり人間ですから、ボケちゃいけない。
So I'm a nice guy, so I won't take the best target.
それはいいんですけど、
That's good, but
だから僕先生構えです。僕先生がここ、前も言ったように、同じことですけど、主に上で勝負し。
you should be able to work on the ground as well, but basically we think that you should be on your feet. Nobuku, you had a question.
ここにみんな言い方は他の日本の武道団も勉強してる方もないですけど、中国の武道を取り上げてくれてるんですけど、日本の武道と中国の今くださったのを比べた場合に、歴史的にも約300年と400年なんですね。日本のと比べてどういうか、例えば日本の武道は皿を持ったりとか始まっていて、それで後で柔道みたいなっていうのがこれを見てると実績使うのがそんなにないんですね。船の方が今伝わってるけども、本当に住んでる魚の場合はすごい刀とかを使ってると思うんですけども、それがこういうのを先に編み出されたっていうのはどういう理由からあるか教えてほしいです。
The question was that in traditional Japanese martial arts, everything started from weapons, and an unarmed combat came long afterwards in history. And now I see a Chinese martial art which seems rather old, in which the practice seems primarily concerned with unarmed combat. And what is the relation in history and in your art weapons to unarmed combat.
例えばね、距離を取ってとね、こういうことなんですよ。ついてきて、そしてパッ倒れた、分かったな、実践的じゃないわけで、ここは触れたらもう一瞬の勝負、当たったらもう遅い。ここはいつでもできるんです。まだダメです。さて変化が頼む。刀の場合も全部で止めなきゃいけない。刺してみるということできない。こういうことできますと実際の入らないとでわからない。
The thing about practicing unarmed is you're able to develop variations. When you practice armed, if you stab somebody, it should be over.
ただ特にこういった銃撃の場合、これ巻き技とかこういったものがあります。これ触れないとわからないんです。これだとね、ちょっとでもあったら危ないんです。だからこれ切ったらもう終わり。
With weapons, it's soon over. You can't study very deeply.
そして特に巻き込んでいる技の場合どうします？できないんです。
You can't. You have to pool all your techniques. You have to stop them.
そしてこっちの方が実践的で対決するチャンスが多いからできてから手の延長に武器を合わせる。
So if you develop this movement with empty hands, you should be able to use weapons the same way. It's that you can't develop as we feel you can't develop as well in the reverse direction.
格闘技の中でもやっぱり接近戦のものが一番実際やってると思うんです。
In combat, close combat is the most realistic way to think. Close combat decides most combat, so that's what we spend most of our time practicing.
やってみないとわからない。戦争も
So we really don't know who's going to win until you actually fight. But this is the best way to take yourself to the limits, because you can't do that so well safely with weapons. Question?
What's the relative combat effectiveness of Tai Chi, Bagua, and Xingyi?
Well, the easiest way is the best, so in that sense, probably Xingyi is the best. So, you know, the way we practice safely, a lot of the forms, you know where you hit, and you pull the punch way before. And it's hard for somebody outside to see what that's like. Knockout tournament. Yeah. Somebody's down. So they have this kind of practicing method to develop one technique. Yeah, we did this before. So the next method of practicing is like Tai Chi push hands. These are methods of developing skill to do free sparring. When there's an opening, you take the opening. Now you see they're doing an open hand so they don't injure each other. They're doing this wrapping technique. So you can move in reverse. You can wrap to the inside, you can wrap to the outside. Yeah, yeah. This is a practicing form, but unlike, for example, Tai Chi, you want to be able to feel that you've really been gotten. But the same way you slap, you can turn that into a punch. So if you'd like to see a real demonstration fight, it's really hard to do it inside the dojo because people know the same techniques. Okay, there's not much time. Can we go on to another question if there are any left? Yes, Laszlo. Well, it matters in the sense that you'll definitely try to move to your strong side. People are that way. You practice balance, but people have their preferences of what attacks they like. Obviously, that has some relation to what hand they prefer. Any other question over there? You should be able to do it when you're old, but of course the movements are different. develop your inner resources, your organs, your inner body. So in a sense, older people are a lot more common in these arts than you see in an outer art, so to speak, which develops your muscles like Shaolin. So yes, of course, you're not going to, in a sense, starting old, you aren't going to maybe become as strong as somebody who studied from youth, but it's certainly going to have benefits. We seem to be out of time. So, one more question? David.
Some of the teachers can take tremendous blows to the stomach and the neck and so forth. Is that regarded as a gimmick, or is it something that comes out naturally from the training?
So he says, for example, there's a very famous man, Wang Jujing.
伝統的な鍛錬法ないしは柔軟法もしありましたらご紹介いただきます。
まず一つの地理状況を見るとですね、こういった安定感を使ったこの歩き方はね、
The question is about the way of walking.
本当は全体
So you're really using your whole foot
でこれはもう
to grasp the ground and using your whole body to
こうい
balance.
ますからこういったことを省いて
That's why you walk in this way from your heels.
それと全然揺らぐと言いますと一つは大型やる今やっぱりは形のみんな大型をやる
Okay, the second question is about way, relaxation and stretching methods.
これ伝統的な鍛錬法こうやって
So this is a big, it's taking one technique and using it as a method of stretching the whole body, stretching and twisting the whole body. So you change the rhythm of your movement, you change the size of the movement, making it big to small. Okay, I'm sorry that's all the time we have, and so I'd like to turn the meeting over to Phil Ronick, who has some JMS business. Thank you, Sensei.
There's a lot to be seen in an exhibition like this. And it's a shame we only have